Hi guys, I'm back again today with another US versus the Netherlands video, and this is the difference in working. So before we start, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button, and yeah, let's find out more differences between the two countries. If it's your first time, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button, and let's begin.
I decided to take a 50% pay cut to work in the Netherlands, but somehow I feel happier. That was my big dilemma after finishing my master's program in the Netherlands. Do I want to stay in the Netherlands and try to find work and see what happens, or do I want to go back to the US and make a lot more money? Show me the money! Well, 4 years later, I'm still here in the Netherlands, and in this video, I want to share with you my experience as an American expat working in the Netherlands when it comes to work culture, work identity, job security, salary, benefits, burnout, and much, much more. And before diving in, it's important to have context. So here's a bit about myself. I currently work in HR for an international IT company in Amsterdam. But before that, I come from California. I studied business economics at UCLA, and I worked in both Hollywood and Silicon Valley doing finance, consulting, design with startup companies and big corporates such as KPMG, Universal Studios, Apple, Amazon. And you see what I just did there? Name drop. It's a very American thing to do to name drop that I don't notice as often in the Netherlands, which leads me to my first point. So, what do you do? A big part of your identity in the US is tied to where you go to school, the job that you do, and the company that you work for. Let me explain because it starts at a very young age. The US education system is a $1 trillion industry, and we learn at a very young age to equate success in life with where you go to school, college,
I'm going to Harvard.
the job that you do.
I am manager of the Scranton branch of Dunder Mifflin.
And now with social media, it's become an even bigger thing, where you go to college.
I just got into Harvard. There's no way that just happened.
Yes, Wei, you just got into Columbia University. Your future is set. And now I feel a bit down because I didn't go to an Ivy League school. But when I did get into top-ranked UCLA, I literally punched a wall out of excitement. Not because UCLA is a great school, which it is, but because I could tell people I go to UCLA. And where you go to school has a big impact on the job you get out of college and ultimately your success in life. Brand name does matter. But this is only if you get into a big name school, work for a big company, or in a prestigious profession. Most people don't, but many do strive to get there. This is where this hustle culture is born out of. That the harder you work, the more that you get. And this identity by association extends into the workplace. What happens when you don't have this label anymore? When I lived in LA, I could tell people that I worked in finance for a Hollywood studio. But after I quit my job, I was unemployed, didn't have a job, didn't have a label, didn't have an identity. And in the Netherlands, no one has come up to me and said, "Oh my God, you went to Maastricht University?" And not because Maastricht isn't a great school, but I feel like when people ask where you went to school, what job you do, it comes out of a place of curiosity, who you are as a person, and not by judgment. And it feels very, very freeing. Well, as you can see, Americans grow up in a society that tends to be more competitive, so there is a bigger need to stand out, to be number one, to be the best, otherwise you might get left behind. And because there is this need to stand out, there's more of this need to show off in order to stand out. In the Netherlands, I find that it's the opposite. There's actually a Dutch saying that goes, "Doe normaal," or act normal.
Doe maar gewoon, dan doe je al gek genoeg.
And this is really about standing in instead of standing out. It's about not showing off. There's also another one that comes from the Dutch education system, the sixes culture, where getting a 6 out of a 10, just passing, is good enough. Now for me, I was a bit shocked and surprised because when I studied here and I got
Dutch culture will be like so me because I was always in the middle anyways. Like I was not great at anything or really bad at something. I was always like okay at most things in life. So I would have done really, really well in that situation wherein you were not pressured to be someone or something that you might not want to be or couldn't be, right? Because here, like I keep saying, it's so similar to the US, wherein they ask you where you went to school. Like, school is really important, and it's also carried into your career life because they look at where you went to school more so than the grades that you got, or more so than anything in your resumes. Oh, let me look at the school. Oh, he went to the top schools here in the Philippines, or even, like, let's say they went to schools abroad. That will carry a lot of weight, right? Even if that school that you went to didn't mean anything, as long as it was outside of the Philippines, it was like even better to some companies, right? So yeah, status, like I keep saying here, means so much. And if you know people, you could get to places. Like, you don't even need to go to school. Like, just know someone. Like, let's say your aunt is the president of Google, and you will get to Google without a resume. Like, how do you call it? Firstly, it's like knowing people, and then secondly is like your status in life and where you went to school, and then they will look at your resume of experiences, and then everybody else, sorry, right?
7 out of a 10, which was a C in the US, just passing. I was disappointed. Now, a 7 in the Netherlands is actually quite good, but I was more shocked to hear that the Dutch students, who some of them got a 6, were quite happy. And then a Dutch classmate told me about the sixes culture, where getting a 6 just passing was good enough for them. And from my experience working in both countries, what I find in the US is it's really about getting done now. It's about going above and beyond, even if it means working more. In the Netherlands, what I find is that the working culture is more chill and relaxed compared to the US. There's also less pressure. If there's something that can be done tomorrow instead of today, let's wait until tomorrow. And this reminds me of a conversation I had with a Dutch guy. He told me in the Netherlands, there isn't this above and beyond culture. Actually, many people don't want to go above a certain level because more responsibility, more stress, but not a lot more money like in the US. Why go for more stress
That
when
is my
life
way
is
of
already pretty
thinking.
good enough? And it's
I
also not
belong
to
there.
say that Dutch do normal or the sixes culture
I always
doesn't mean
say
that the
work
Dutch are not
smart, not
ambitious.
hard.
They are actually one of the most innovative countries in the world, but it just means that they're okay with good enough, and it's okay not to brag. And this Dutch way of do normal is shown in its egalitarian culture. Dutch people don't care about who you are, your title, your status as much as Americans do. It's about being the same in the Netherlands. People are viewed more or less as equals. And this also complements the famous Dutch directness. When there is less hierarchy, you feel like it's okay to be honest, to say anything, whether it's the janitor or the CEO. In the US, you have to be a bit more careful about what you say and to whom. But in the US, because there is more hierarchy, decisions are usually made a lot faster. In the US, decisions are made by people at the top. In the Netherlands, decisions are usually made by the group. For example, in the Netherlands, what usually happens if you want to make a big decision is you'll have meetings and you'll have to get the consensus and input by members of the group before making a final decision. And from my experience working in the US, of course people do ask you for your input as a lower level employee, but if it's a big decision, usually, say, the VP will make the decision. And while things may happen faster in the US, faster doesn't always mean more effective. And faster doesn't always mean less hours as well. There's a popular saying that goes like this: in the US, you live to work. In Europe, you work to live. And I remember my first month working in the Netherlands. It was around 5 o'clock and I walked around and it looked like there was nobody in the office except for me. Because in the US, especially in big corporate companies, you don't really see too many people get off around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. If we look at OECD statistics, We can see that only 0.3% of workers in the Netherlands work very long hours as compared to 10.4% of workers in the US. At the same time, we can also see that the Netherlands is a country with one of the shortest working weeks in terms of hours at around 30 hours per week compared to 39 hours in the US. A big reason why this is so is because part-time work is actually quite common in the Netherlands. And it's actually quite common to find people only working 4 days a week or with 36-hour contracts. For example, my colleague has a 36-hour contract, so every 2 weeks she gets 1 day off. And I asked her why she did this. She told me she values time over money. Such a thing is unthinkable in the US, where it's really about work.
And outside of work, I used to always talk about work. My European friends used to tell me to stop talking about work outside of work, and it took me about a year to finally get it. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but just an observation that Americans do tend to talk more about work outside of work.
But it's also very different, the mentality in the Netherlands. The mentality in the US is really about work and making money, and you can actually make a lot of money in the US. So if your goal is to make money, the US wins.
You get paid a lot of money in the States, especially if you compare it to what you make in the Netherlands.
You can sometimes make 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x what you could make in the Netherlands in the US. Let's look at a few examples.
Let's take a look at some salaries. A software engineer, a financial analyst, and a teacher in the Netherlands as compared to the US.
Ooh,
Now,
interesting.
if you are a software engineer in Amsterdam, you can make a median total compensation of 93,000 euros. This includes a base salary, stock options, and a bonus. If you are a top engineer, you could make up to, say, 400,000 euros per year. Now, compare that to San Francisco software engineer salaries. And in SF, you make a lot more money. in
What
tech
is
as a
US
software
on
engineer.
about?
231,000 median total compensation. Now, here's the big difference. If you are a top engineer in a place like San Francisco, you can make a lot of money. Millions of dollars as a software engineer. And a big portion of that is due to stock options. Now, let's take a look at a financial analyst in Amsterdam, 63,000 euros as compared to $150,000 in San Francisco. And a teacher, one of the most important professions, a teacher in the Netherlands will make 50,000 euros per year as compared to the US, 65,000 per year. The US is really big, so if we look at a place like California teachers make around 85,000 per year. Now, while that might be high, if you're a teacher making 85K in San Francisco,
I'm thinking,
that's actually quite low because the cost of living in San Francisco is really high. So this is a very simple comparison between Dutch and American taxes. Simple because taxes are complicated. So these are the Dutch tax rates. You have two of them. Anything above 73K, you're getting taxed 50%. Now, US taxes are more complicated because you have a federal tax rate and potentially a state tax rate.
What?
For example, in California, you do pay state income taxes, but in Texas, you don't. What you can see is
That's
generally you
Texas.
pay more taxes in the Netherlands. Let's take a look at 5 examples of 5 different salaries of what you would get in your take-home pay per month in the Netherlands and also in the US. And what you can see is generally what you get in your paycheck in the US is going to be more than the Netherlands. Where you see a difference is once you make a lot more money, especially in the US. For example, 100K, 200K, you get a lot more in your paycheck per month. Now, why? Well, it goes back to the fact that anything above 73,000 in the Netherlands is taxed at 50%.
So what's the finding? Well, it's more complicated than that, but if your goal is to make money and you're fortunate enough to be in a top profession, then the US is the place to be. In the Netherlands, you can't make as much money, but you also don't need to as well. You go to the Netherlands for balance. And a big part of balance is 1, vacation days, and 2, the ability to take your vacation days as well. In the US, there isn't a federal guarantee of minimum vacation days per employee. It depends on the company, and the average is still around 2 weeks. In the Netherlands, the amount is 20 days. In my company, I get 25 days, but I have friends who get 40 days off per year. In the US,
Wow.
I almost never took all my vacation days. Here in the Netherlands, I always take my vacation days. For example, in my first year working in the Netherlands, I had 25 days of vacation, but I didn't use up all 25 days. I didn't use up most of my vacation, if I'm honest. And my colleagues were like, "Are you serious? How come you're not using your vacation days?" And I was like, can I do that? Is that possible? Because the norm in the US is really to work. Most people don't take all their vacation days. But the norm in Europe, in the Netherlands, is that everyone is taking their vacation days, especially in the summertime. And when that's the norm, then you also feel okay to take vacation as well. And the US is the country with the most unused vacation days at the end of the year. Which begs the question, why is that so? One reason may be tied to job security. People may not feel comfortable taking all the vacation in the US because there's too much work to do. One may fall behind, and if one falls behind, one may not get promoted, and one could get laid off as well, because US employment is at will, which means you can get fired at
Oh yeah,
any
you don't
time.
have contracts.
And especially right now with all the tech layoffs, people may not want to take vacation because, well, they want to prove themselves. But here, what I see in the Netherlands is that a lot of
Probably would
employees
get
are
fired the
still
first
taking their
month
vacation
if
days,
I was in the
even if
US,
their companies
so I'm
aren't
taking
doing that
vacation.
well. And that's because employees in the Netherlands get a lot of rights. So now I work in HR, and I was talking to a friend who works in HR, and she was telling me how common it can be for managers in the US to try to fire someone in one of the European offices or the Dutch office because that person is underperforming.
And I want Charles gone. I need him gone.
Then this HR manager needs to let them know that it's not easy to just fire someone in the Netherlands. And with layoffs, a company can really only lay people off if they can prove that the company is doing bad financially. So one could say it's easier to hire and fire in the US, and it's harder to hire and fire in the Netherlands. But this job security in the Netherlands depends if it's a temporary contract or a permanent contract. And this was a shock for me coming from the US because most employees have permanent contracts to start with. But in the Netherlands, most employees have temporary contracts to begin with. And these temporary contracts can only be converted to permanent after 3 years or after 3 extensions, or if your employer decides to convert it before then. But once it does become a permanent contract, it's gold. In the US, most contracts are permanent contracts, but then you can get let go at any time. It's easier to hire,
dumb.
easier to fire. But once you do get a job contract in the US, it's also gold because usually with a job contract, that also means healthcare. Oh, healthcare in the US, such a big and complex topic. It gives me headaches. But it is really important because when you consider a job, you also take into consideration the healthcare plan of the employer, because your healthcare is usually tied to your employer, and healthcare in the US is extremely expensive. In the Netherlands, healthcare is not free, but it is affordable. For example, you'll pay 100 to 200 euros a month when it comes to healthcare, dental, and vision. And the deductible, it's around 400 euros per year. And in the US, this amount can vary because it's so complex. There's so many different types of healthcare plans, but you'll generally pay on average around 8,000 US dollars per year for a single person. And the average deductible is around $2,000. So you will have to pay $2,000 out of pocket before the benefits come into play.
My annual health insurance in Holland is the same as my monthly health insurance in the States, my premium. I pay $2,500 per month for my health insurance.
And speaking of healthcare, let's talk a little bit about sick leave, short-term and long-term sick leave. In the US, if you get sick with a cold or flu, now this is going to depend on your job contract, your employer, but generally you do get some sick days. For example, one of my jobs in the US, I had 15 days of vacation, and I believe it was like 5, 6 days of sick leave. And if
No,
I were
same
sick
same
more
here.
than 6 days, then I would need to use my vacation days.
Yeah,
What I
same in the
found
Philippines.
in the Netherlands is that if you become sick with a cold or flu, something short term, you can generally just take the days off. Now, when it comes to long-term sick
What?
leave, in the US, there
That's
is
cool.
no federal requirement for paid long-term sick leave. This also depends on your employer and also the state.
So, if you're burnt out, sick, disabled long term in the US, then an individual may take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave over 12 months. Now, if you're burnt out, sick, disabled long term in the Netherlands, then by law, the company is required to pay you at least 70% of your wages for a
Whoa.
maximum period of 2 years.
2 years.
Now, many companies will often
Woo.
pay 100% in that first year, and some will pay 100% for 2 years.
And something else I
Netherlands
found out
is
about recently
doing
working
life
in
the
the
right way.
Netherlands is if you're sick on
Because you
vacation.
are not gonna tell human beings, yo, don't you can only have 5 days in a year to get sick. And you only have 15 days for your vacation, so you use that. So if you, let's say you're sick for a total of 20 days, knock on wood, or you have like medical stuff, right? Then after you get sick and do your medical process, you don't have any vacation throughout the whole year. What is my life? Like, okay, yes, we get weekends off so you can rejuvenate during those times, but then it's like scrap everything planned for the year. Like, let's say I'm gonna attend my graduation of my children, forget it, right? Because I used 20 days when I was doing my operation or healing from my operation, let's say. Wow.
You're eligible to swap those days
They
out
need
for
robots. They
sick
don't
days
need human
instead.
to
For
work because
example, one
that's
of my
impossible.
friends went to Malaysia and she got sick. And when she came back, her employer found out and told her just to swap out those days and use sick days instead of vacation days. So that's a pretty cool benefit as well. I'm burnt out. How normal it is for people to openly admit that they are burnt out or were burnt out. I mean, by now I've met at least 10 people who have told me that they're currently going through burnout or they went through burnout. And to say it openly like it's a normal sickness like a cold or flu. But in fact, in the Netherlands, burnout is treated like a normal sickness. But when I was working in the US, I had never heard of the word burnout, nor did I know what it meant. But in the Netherlands, I hear it all the time, left and right. And it's not because there's more burnout in the Netherlands. In fact, if you look at studies, there
Sorry.
seems to be more burnout cases in the US compared to the Netherlands. Well, again, like we discussed, there is protection and employee rights when it comes to burnout in the Netherlands. So burnout is not a good thing at all, but in the Netherlands, it's not as stigmatized as much as it is in other countries. People feel like it's okay to admit that they're burnt out, to admit that they need help, because they do get protection, they do get benefits when it comes to burnout and sick leave, and that's the big difference.
So, which is a better country to work in? Well, that depends on who you are, what you value, your dreams
like
and goals
Netherlands.
in
I don't
life.
care about money.
Generally, in the
I mean,
US, you
money is
can make a lot
important.
more money depending on the profession, but
if
it
you die
tends to favor
tomorrow,
those in
then
the
what-
top 1,
where does your
5,
money go?
10% of the population, and those that are more career driven. Now, in the Netherlands, you do get more work-life balance. Pace of work life is generally slower, and you do get more personal time and employee rights as well. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What have your experiences been working in the US and or the Netherlands?
None.
Leave them in the comments below, and I hope you take care.
That was very good. Like, I love the detail because he has experienced both. So he's a rightful person to talk about both sides, right? And compare them. But me as an individual, I would choose the Netherlands just because of my personality and the way that I perceive the world. Like, one day we're all gonna be 6 feet under. So why are we going to stress ourselves with a crazy work style, right? And life. Why are we going to earn all these things in life? Um when we're gonna leave it behind one day. So I say, like, live for your means, like live within your means, or like do things that make you happy. If it's a mansion and a house that makes you happy, then that's your that's you. But for me, it's not material stuff. It's about like memories and enjoying the world, the people, being happy. I don't really care about the fancy cars, the fancy house, the fancy clothes, and all that stuff. So Netherlands would be for me, because then I have time to enjoy the things I want to enjoy, as well as I will have enough money to enjoy them as well, right? I would be like locked up in a freaking desk from 9 to 5 plus extra hours as well. So I'm going to Europe because that's where I belong. Why was I born here? I don't know. But anyways, that is always my question. Thank you guys. Let me know your answer in the comments actually, because I'm really intrigued to hear your perspective, because you might be a European who is like, nah, I choose the American work life. Let me know. If you like this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.